This innocent-looking strip of sand looks like many along the Atlantic coast, and if you've ever been out to Sandy Hook, New Jersey, you've passed right by here. Welcome to Destinations Past. I'm your host, Chris Brenner. Travel with us back in time as we explore the New Jersey icon, once called Highland Beach. Sandy Hook, New Jersey is a 6-mile-long peninsula located 20 miles south of New York City. It is the northern tip of what becomes 100 miles of beaches, known as the Jersey Shore. In 1609, English explorer Henry Hudson landed nearby on behalf of the Dutch government on his way to exploring and settling the New York area and what is now the Hudson River. In the mid-1700s, the British made Sandy Hook a staging base for the Royal Navy and infantry during the Revolutionary War. The British also built a lighthouse on the point of Sandy Hook for navigation in 1764, and today it stands as the oldest working lighthouse in America. 100 years later, after the Civil War, America was embarking on the Industrial Revolution. New York City and northern New Jersey boomed with manufacturing, and its population swelled with millions of European immigrants. Meanwhile, in Monmouth County, New Jersey, 1865 brought the Long Branch and Seashore Railroad to be built, providing rail service from Long Branch, northbound along the ocean, to the middle of Sandy Hook, where there was a ferry landing. The train made stops in Monmouth Beach, Seabright, and other locations along the way. Connecting ferry service to various points, including New York City, opened this part of New Jersey to the vast New York population. At the southern end of Sandy Hook, between the Shrewsbury River and Atlantic Ocean, the barrier beach narrows to just a few hundred yards wide, across from the village of Highlands. In the 1870s, this barrier beach was sparsely populated with large estate homes and small fishing villages. A large portion of the land was owned by then State Senate President Anthony Reckless and his wife of Red Bank. On February 28, 1881, the Recklesses sold 1.3 miles of the land to the Highland Beach Association, a group of real estate investors, for the price of $10,000. The land was divided up into 74 building lots that spanned east to west across the barrier island. The strip was renamed Highland Beach. To the north of this plot was Fort Hancock, which extended out to the end of Sandy Hook and was owned by the federal government. Across the narrow river is the village of Highlands, and on the hill above this point, in 1862, the famous Twin Lights lighthouse was constructed to aid navigation into New York Harbor. Within 10 years of the property sale to the investors, a bridge was built across the Narrows connecting Highlands and Highland Beach. The bridge opened on December 5th 1872, under the ownership of the Highlands Bridge Company. But after an accident in which a ferry collided with the bridge, rendering it unsafe, the bridge was sold to the Navesink Bridge Company, repaired and reopened on June 27, 1878. The bridge was known locally as the Walking Bridge, as it was suited for pedestrians and horses. One section, near the Highland shore, had a swing opening to allow for marine traffic to pass. Passage across the bridge required paying a toll at the Highlands end. Out on the barrier island, a road, Ocean Avenue, was built alongside the railroad. With the walking bridge now in place, access to Highland Beach was open to inland populations from Highlands, Atlantic Highlands, and Middletown. A small rail station was built at the foot of the walking bridge, providing access to the railroad for the inland residents. In November of 1887, the Highland Beach Association started leasing several of the lots to the Highland Beach Improvement Company, a group led by Mr. Ferdinand Fish, a New York-based investor with local properties. He made plans to construct multiple buildings, including a train station, pavilion, stores, hotels, and restaurants. On the northernmost lots, near the entrance to Fort Hancock, several cottages were to be built for both seasonal and permanent living. Around this time, famous spots such as Coney Island started to emerge as day trip destinations for city dwellers. To provide more of a draw, Coney Island added its first carousel in 1876, followed by the nation's first roller coaster in 1884. The Thompson Switchback Railroad was installed at Coney Island by Lamarcus Thompson himself. One of the next locations for Mr. Thompson's invention was none other than Highland Beach, where Mr. William Sandlass Jr., a young, adventurous master carpenter, champagne salesman, and card player, oversaw the construction of the Thompson Switchback Railroad in 1888. The thrill ride was officially named the Great Switchback Railroad. It propelled riders at, quote, the reckless speed of 6 miles per hour, end quote, as one paper described it, over rises and falls, all while overlooking the ocean and river. Riders would travel from one tower to the far end, switch cars, and return to the launch tower, all propelled by gravity. Mr. Fish had multiple projects underway besides Highland Beach, including the development of the Water Witch Club, a project just behind Twin Lights, today known as Monmouth Hills. Fish was not interested in the operations of the services at Highland Beach, and so he leased the majority of the lots and structures to Sandlass, whose entrepreneurial spirit set up the initial operations for a highly successful excursion resort. From 1887 on, there was a flurry of development and activity on the land. Sandlass could see the future of the location as a major destination for thousands from the region, and he used his charisma and leadership to achieve some amazing results. Over the next 24 months, William Sandlass, his family, and growing staff constructed cabanas, cottages, and an open pavilion. Swimming beaches were organized on both the ocean and river shores. At this point, Highland Beach was ready to launch as a major New York area tourist destination, and the market was more than ready. In the heat of New York City summers, throngs of workers and young families sought escape from the sweltering temperatures, not to mention the stench from thousands of horses and poor sanitary systems in New York. A day by the sea, with fresh air, cool breezes, swimming, and picnics, provided welcome relief, and Highland Beach was open for business.
In the good old summertime, in the good old summertime, strolling through the shady lanes with your baby mine. You hold her hand and she holds yours, and that's a very good sign. That she's your tootsie wootsie in the good old summertime. There's a time in each year.
Sandlass built an extended steamboat dock on the west side of the property into the deeper waters of the Shrewsbury River. This allowed larger steamers from New York City, which already provided seasonal service to Rumson, Fairhaven, and Red Bank, to dock at Highland Beach as well. The resort was advertised in the city as the nearest available ocean beach on the New Jersey coast, and the game was on.
In the good old summertime, in the good old summertime, strolling through the shady lanes with your baby mine. You hold her hand and she holds yours, and that's a very good sign. That she's your tootsie wootsie in the good old summertime. In the good old summertime.
A well-orchestrated advertising campaign aligned with the steamboat carriers, such as the Keansburg Steamship Company and others, promoted Highland Beach as an excursion destination to New York City residents. Some of the write-ups mention attractions such as especially fine bathing in both the river and ocean, which are just 50 yards apart, and fast steam launch rides, hammocks, lawn tennis, croquet, rifle shooting, archery, scups, and seesaws are all provided at a trifling cost. Other features proclaimed excellent drainage resulting in no mosquitoes or malaria. Features always desirable in a vacation spot. The advertising and expanded ferry service worked, and from 1888 through 1890, the resort business saw dramatic growth. For the 1890 season, Highland Beach added the Surf House Hotel, bathhouses for changing into rented swimsuits, swim platforms, a lily pond, an ice house, as well as stagecoach rides and tours of nearby towns. Guest houses and hotels in the area provided lodging for those who stayed for the weekend or longer, including several across the river in Highlands. Just south of Highland Beach was the massive Normandy by the Sea, which could accommodate over 300 guests. Back at Highland Beach, the Pavilion offered a restaurant with seating for 300, serving local seafood and produce, steaks, along with freshly baked breads and confections. A full-service bar served the guests in open-air comfort as they overlooked the ocean to the east and the river to the west. The signature meal was called the Shrewsbury Dinner, which included clam chowder, steamers, fresh fish, seafood salads, and desserts, all for the bundled price of $1. The weather seemed to always create some havoc, however, as reports from September of 1889 show either a hurricane or nor'easter that not only destroyed 2 miles of railroad line, but actually opened a breach from the ocean to the river right at Highland Beach. The breach was so extensive that the railroad had to build a trestle over the water to continue service to Sandy Hook. Despite these setbacks, Sandlass and his crew continued to expand, and by the early 1890s, they had added a photo studio, horse stables, pagodas as attractions, and of course, the Switchback Railroad continued as a property favorite. By now, the resort had gained a legendary reputation with city dwellers, and the number of visitors swelled. Other resorts in the area started to arise, and the entire area became a popular getaway in what was the dawn of Jersey Shore tourism. The opportunity grew so large that in 1892, the Central Railroad of New Jersey, which had had rail service that crisscrossed Monmouth County, made some bold moves. First, the railroad built a massive pier at Atlantic Highlands, just 3 miles to the west, that connected large steamships from Manhattan to a rail line that started right on the pier. Then, the Central Railroad built an expansion spur along the bay to Highlands that included a new rail bridge across the Shrewsbury River to Highland Beach. Tourists had the option of taking the train from Atlantic Highlands or several smaller steam launches across the bay to Highland Beach. Records show that the launches alone were capable of carrying 3,000 people per day. In the summer of 1892, Sandlass added the first merry-go-round on the site, where riders were encouraged to, quote, go for it, end quote, meaning they should grab the brass ring in the center as the horses circled around. With the enhanced transportation access and the new attractions, Highland Beach hosted over 125,000 visitors that summer. The golden age of Highland Beach had arrived. By 1893, the Gravity Railroad had run its course, and due to lack of interest, Sandlass removed the attraction. However, always in a spirit of moving forward, a long boardwalk was added overlooking the ocean, complete with seating and shaded areas for maximum comfort. The Sandlass team also added new stores and buildings, including a bowling alley and billiard rooms, with rental apartments located above. That year, William Sandlass signed a new 5-year lease with the Highland Beach Improvement Company, but not everything in 1893 was positive. The morals of the era leaned towards civility and religious respect, and public sentiment started to question the games of chance and alcohol consumption as corruptive forces in society. Local laws were passed prohibiting some of the games and attractions from operating on Sundays, which was one of the biggest days of the week. One account had the local constable demanding that Sandlass shut down the carousel on Sundays. The business survived these challenges, however, and remained a favorite excursion. By 1895, Highland Beach was hosting a gala day, in which the resort held special events like rowing races, fishing contests, tennis tournaments, and grand illuminations, or what would be called today fireworks. These special days drew enormous crowds, with some accounts saying 15,000 or more attending. Dignitaries and celebrities joined the crowd, such as New Jersey Governor Robert Greene. Sandlass even published a small newspaper for Highland Beach called The Oracle. By 1897, Sandlass had proven that the resort was successful and profitable, and due to his stronger financial position, he signed a new 24-year lease with the Highland Beach Improvement Company, ensuring a generation of future summer fun at the site. A few of the structures on the land were sold directly to Sandlass as well. The next decade saw continued growth and success, with some highlights including the America's Cup sailing race, which was held just offshore Highland Beach. Accounts of the 1899 race describe over 75,000 people lining the beach to watch the yachts in action. The America's Cup was a very popular sporting event in this period, but difficult to watch from shore. News coverage became critical, and all the big New York papers would send reporters out on ships to capture the action. In 1899, the method for this reporting took an historical turn in the air right above Highland Beach. Guillermo Marconi set up a Morse code transmission site at Twin Lights and put another transmitter on a ship near the racecourse. As race results came in, the news was transmitted back to Marconi at Twin Lights, where it was then passed by wire line to New York City. The New York Herald, which sponsored the experiment, received over 2,000 words of news and went to press instantly, scooping all the other New York papers by a day. This was the first commercial application of radio transmission, and it changed the world forever. By 1906, a new form of entertainment was sweeping the nation: the movies. Highland Beach was already a favorite destination for silent movie stars like Mary Pickford and Max Sennett. Sandlass and the team at Highlands were quickly to incorporate movie viewing into the resort experience. Sandlass opened the Airdrome Theater, an open-air movie venue. During the winters in this period, Sandlass liked to travel to Florida and Cuba and took a liking to the look of bamboo and palm trees. He arranged for shipments of the material to be sent to Highland Beach, and that decor graced the new theater and even more of the resort later on. But screening wasn't the only connection to the movie industry. Famous director D.W. Griffith filmed 4 movies between 1908 and 1910 on the beach at the site. Visitors could watch the filming from the boardwalk, adding yet another draw and making Highland Beach famous in movie houses across the country. William Sandlass's growing family helped operate the business as his children reached adulthood. His oldest son, Bill, even opened a second beach club in Seabright called the Sandlass, whose main structure was in place up until 2012 when Hurricane Sandy destroyed it. A new club, Sands Beach Club, now stands in its location. Sadly, on a winter trip to Cuba, William Sandlass's wife, Catherine, died from an illness in 1908. As the new decade of 1910 arrived, so did the first sightings of a new and life-changing device: the automobile. Up until this point, visitors to Highland Beach arrived by train or boat, and destinations were limited to locations serviced by mass transportation or limited by the duration of a buggy ride. With the advent of the car, things started to change. The first challenge for Sandlass was how to provide parking on a strip of land so narrow it barely held the pedestrians during busy weekends. As roadways improved, so did the traffic. And what started in this decade would prove to foreshadow bigger challenges in the future. With all three modes of transportation in use during 1910, it was in fact the busiest summer ever at the resort. Some accounts show 20,000 visitors in one day and huge crowds over the 3 days of the 4th of July weekend. By 1912, Sandlass had remarried, this time to Helen Lynch, who would go on to become a very active member of the Highland Beach management staff. The new Mrs. Sandlass, along with her sister, May Lynch Smith, moved her family onto the property and started operating the pavilion and other attractions. More changes began that year with the opening of more mature activities at the Darhay and Surf Club lounges on the southern end of the property. A year later, in 1913, the Sandlasses are blessed with a son, Henry, during a terrible winter storm. Henry will go on to play a critical role in our story. With the outbreak of World War I, the population was distracted, but still flocked to Highland Beach each summer. The new Bamboo Garden Bar and Airdrome Theater added live music, much to the delight of the guests. A featured performer was Earl Fuller's Ragtime Band, which hailed from Rector's Restaurant in Manhattan, and they were a regular billing. In the summer of 1916, a startling turn of events at the Jersey Shore shocked the nation and actually created a local business, still a favorite today. That summer, what is thought to be a great white shark made its way from Long Beach Island all the way up to Matawan Creek, attacking 5 people and killing 4 of them along the way, including children swimming far inland in Matawan. The effect on tourism was devastating, with many beach closings and others placing nets around swimming areas in an effort to make swimmers more comfortable. In Highlands, the local boat rental business at the foot of Miller Street saw its customers all but disappear. No one wanted to be in the water in small boats fishing and crabbing. The Bars family needed to make ends meet, and so they purchased a building near the foot of the bridge across from Highland Beach and started to sell food to tourists. Bars Restaurant became a local and regional favorite, still run by the same family nearly 100 years later. After the war, good times returned as the nation entered the Roaring '20s. The Monmouth County area took hold as the place to summer. Jazz music was in fashion, and Highland Beach responded, hiring popular bands to play in the Bamboo Garden on weekends. Of course, with the start of Prohibition, Highland Beach was dealt a blow. The revenue stream from alcohol sales stopped, and things started to change. Much of the New York tourist trade slowed, but more local permanent residents remained as the area gentrified. The explosion of automobiles and roads forced some of the local trolley lines to shut down as more emphasis was put on roads and bridges to accommodate all the cars. Sandlass upped the level of decor and services, adding a spa and hairdresser, as well as other visual improvements. By 1923, Sandlass finally bought out the land and title to the resort from the Highland Beach Improvement Company. By the late 20s, the transportation load had inverted, with more visitors arriving by car instead of train and boat. This traffic caused large backups in the area, and parking was a daily problem. Despite these issues, the business was humming along until, that is, 1929 and the crash of the stock market, resulting in the start of the Great Depression. There is no doubt that the Depression had serious effects on Highland Beach, like almost all businesses. In 1930, the name of the resort was changed to the Sandlass Baths, and some of the amenities were also adjusted. During the 1930s, William Sandlass's two sons, Bill and Henry, operated not just the Sandlass in Seabright, but also opened the Sandlass Brothers Bathing Pavilion, nestled between the Seabright Beach Club and the Peninsula House Hotel. That club, locally known as SBBP, would later adjust its name to the Seabright Bathing Pavilion and is today known as Chapel Beach Club. In 1932, public works were underway in grand scale. The automobile traffic was intense, and so the state of New Jersey built a new $1 million bridge across the Highlands Narrows. The walking bridge was torn down, but the rail bridge remained in place. The new car bridge featured a split lift opening and higher roadway to accommodate marine traffic. Construction of the new bridge caused dramatic changes to Highland Beach, however. The Surf House Hotel and Basket Pavilion had to be torn down to make room for the landing ramp of the bridge. The new bridge also pointed cars towards Seabright, adding a slight turning obstacle for visitors arriving from the west. All of these changes took its toll on the aging William Sandlass, and his health started to decline. At the north end of the property, some of the summer bungalows became more permanent, at its peak leasing to 25 tenants on what was called Dock Street. Even houseboats were allowed to moor near the cottages. By 1935, William Sandlass was failing, and his son Henry had to leave college to take over operations of the Sandlass Baths. Then sadly, in 1938, after 50 years since building the Switchback Railroad, William Sandlass passed away. Henry, along with his mother Helen, ran the property as the nation prepared for World War II. With the war looming, the Army base at Fort Hancock started to surge. Heavy guns and mortars were built to defend New York Harbor, and thousands of troops were brought in. The problem was, these men and materials had to pass through the narrow road that ran right through the middle of the Sandlass Baths. In fact, one building sat in the middle of the road, creating a narrow width on both sides. As such, the government sued the resort for right-of-way to widen the road and take over parts of the Sandlass property. In 1939, the Army won its case, and Henry and Helen were forced to physically move that structure to another spot on the property. That building is the only one left today, although it too is in jeopardy of being torn down. One of the buildings on site, the bowling alley, was converted to a bar called the Bamboo Room, and this night spot became a favorite for tourists, soldiers, and locals alike. Music and dancing filled the air as thousands made memories there on warm summer nights. By 1940, the rail system in New Jersey had started to collapse under the popularity of the automobile. The Central Railroad of New Jersey shut down the coastline service, and the rail bridge over the river was dismantled. State highways like Route 35 and Route 36 were starting to emerge, and travel by car became even easier with gas stations and rest areas being built. All of this led to further changes at Sandlass. New York tourists had other options now, and they started to explore sites further south, like Point Pleasant and Seaside Heights. Attractions like the merry-go-round faded, and the building at Sandlass was converted to the Smith Summer Home. At the same time, for the same reasons, the steamship lines ceased service to New Jersey, further cutting off access to the resort. By 1941, with the U.S. entering the war once again, travel and recreation took a back seat. Henry Sandlass enlisted in the Coast Guard, and his cousin, Fran Smith, also joined the service, leaving a leadership void at the property at times. During the war years, Helen Sandlass ran the business, along with other family members. Before deploying to the South Pacific in 1942, Henry Sandlass marries Midge Sheehan. All the family members and the business survived World War II, but the property took on a different feel after the war. With the changes to the transportation infrastructure, a more local crowd frequented the beaches, and the Bamboo Room Bar became the social epicenter of the area each summer evening. Jazz and swing bands and even crooners sang into the soft air for dancing and romancing. In the late 1940s, Henry Sandlass added some new sports attractions to the property, including volleyball, tennis, a softball field, and croquet courts. In the 50s, Henry and Midge Sandlass raised 5 children on the property, in the same structure that was once situated in the middle of the roadway, and still stands on the property today. The 1950s were steady times at Sandlass, with a family-friendly club atmosphere. Swimming lessons, family events, big crowds ruled the day, and business was solid. They say it's calmest before the storm, however, and 1960 saw the start of construction on one of the defining features of New Jersey, the Garden State Parkway. This high-speed, limited-access roadway opened up Southern Shore beaches for easy driving access from the north. Places like Lavallette, Long Beach Island, and Seaside became the prime destination for summer fun, and northern Monmouth County quieted substantially. At the same time, the state was starting to take over the southern half of Fort Hancock from the federal government, and they had plans for a large state park and beach on Sandy Hook. The state knew there would be large crowds and lots of traffic to use these pristine beaches never before open to the public, and that meant the need for roads and parking. Sandlass Beach Club stood right in the way. The state sued under eminent domain laws, and in 1962 won a court case despite a hearty fight from the Sandlass family and many supporters. June 1st, 1962 was the club's last day of operation. By July of 1962, Sandy Hook State Park opened, as demolition of some of the buildings on the site was completed. Other structures survived and were repurposed for a time, some even into the 1970s. Most of the 500 member families transferred their memberships to the Sandlass Club in Seabright, and many of the traditions, and even some of the furniture, moved there. For 75 years, this magical location was a summer paradise for hundreds of thousands of guests. In many ways, this place launched the Jersey Shore tourism business, and the Sandlass and Smith families provided generations of service and fun to all who set foot on Highland Beach.